Welcome back to In the Arena with Stephanie. I am so glad that you are here today. So, today we're talking about something you probably do without even realizing it. It's something that's costing you more than you know, and that is you're accommodating other people's insecurity and it's eroding your identity. So, let's go ahead and dive in. Here's a question I want you to sit with. How many times this week did you adjust yourself, your tone, your boundaries, your convictions, not because God asks you to, but because someone else couldn't handle the real you? Let me give you an example. Maybe you softened your feedback in that meeting because your boss gets defensive when challenged, even though you knew the project was headed in the wrong direction. Or maybe you didn't speak up and ask for clarity about the decision because the team was already unsettled and you didn't want to create more tension. Now, here's the thing. In both of these examples, you told yourself it was wisdom. You called it being a peacemaker. You even framed it as humility. But let me tell you what it actually is. It's accommodating insecurity, and that's not your job. When you adjust your God given identity, your voice, your boundaries to compensate for someone else's emotional fragility, you're not keeping the peace. You're building a golden calf at the expense of your identity. And I'm going to explain what I mean by the golden calf. And so today, we're going to talk about the damage that you are doing to yourself when you are accommodating insecurity of others. And I'm talking about not just noticing it, not just navigating it, but actually adjusting your values, adjusting your boundaries and your behavior so that you can make other people feel more comfortable. And when you're doing this, it really is at the expense of who you are. So let me give you a scenario. You're part of a team. You're committed. You're prepared. You're consistent. You show up to the meetings early. You take your role seriously. You care about the outcome, not just for yourself, but for everyone involved. But the leadership is inconsistent. Their decisions feel off. They're not well thought out. They're not aligned with the actual strengths of the team. And you start noticing these patterns. You see people being favored or protected. You see standards that are shifting depending on who's involved. You see that feedback is being welcomed in theory, but really it's resisted in practice. And you ask a few thoughtful questions where you're not combative, you just want to get clarity, and the responses that you receive are subtle shutdowns, defensiveness, and somewhat distance. So you adjust. You stop asking. You start over preparing so that you can compensate. You carry more than your role requires because you don't want things to fall apart. So now, externally, everything looks fine, but internally, you still know something is off. You feel it in the misalignment. You feel it in the lack of integrity in the process. You feel it in the quiet frustration of knowing that this could be better, but I'm not allowed to say it. So you make a decision. And that decision is, let me just stay in my lane. Let me not disrupt anything. And slowly, you disconnect from your voice and from who you truly are. Does that sound familiar? I can remember a time in my career where I was in that scenario. And I didn't realize at the time that I was slowly disconnecting from my identity. So let's name what's actually happening in that type of scenario. You see, this is not just poor leadership. It's not just a communication issue, but this is what happens when insecurity is driving an individual in the arena. When your leader or the authority figure operates out of insecurity, they avoid corrections, they delay decisions, they tolerate misalignment, they prioritize comfort over clarity, and instead of letting it be exposed, you accommodate it. You adjust your behavior so that you could avoid triggering it. You may shrink your clarity so that you maintain peace. You start absorbing responsibility that isn't yours to carry. And then something somewhat dangerous really could happen, and it's subtle. The burden of their insecurity shifts onto you. So instead of them rising in their leadership, you start shrinking so that you can maintain stability. This situation reminded me of a story in the Bible, in Exodus chapter 32. What is happening in this chapter? Moses is on the mountain with God. The people are waiting down below at the base, and they start getting a little bit of anxiety. They even say, or even start looking at Moses being up there as a delay. And so they go to Aaron and they ask him to make them a god. They basically say to him, we do not know what has become of Moses, so we need for you to make us a god. Now, typically, when we hear this story, it is taught about idolatry, and that is true. If you read the story closer, you will see that they made a golden calf and they started to worship it. But if you look at the story a little deeper, this is also an example of a leader accommodating the insecurity of other people. So let's look at it a little closer and let's break it down. So again, the people say, we don't know what's become of Moses. They say he's delayed. And so this is some of their anxiety and their insecurity that is showing. They start asking Aaron to do something now. So they're a little bit demanding. They don't want to wait. And Aaron, he is basically the leader that was left in the camp. He had been by Moses' side. He had seen the plagues. He had walked through the Red Sea, and he knew who God was and what God could do. But what does he do? He tells them, okay, I'll create something for you. And so he tells them to give him their golden earrings. And he proceeds to make them a golden calf. What was he doing? He was accommodating their insecurities. Notice he didn't say, no, we'll wait on God, we'll wait on Moses. He didn't say, your anxiety doesn't get to dictate our worship. He didn't hold the line, but instead, he managed their feelings by giving them what they wanted. He built them that golden calf and he called it worship. Instead of Aaron leading, he adjusted to accommodate their insecurity. He built something to calm them down, not because it was right, but because it relieved the pressure. Making a decision to maintain emotional peace is not spiritual integrity. Aaron adapted his values so that he could stabilize an insecure people. And instead of anchoring himself in what he already knew was true, he adjusted to what the people felt. And honestly, if you're not careful, you'll do the exact same thing, because this type of situation where people are insecure and they're putting that pressure on you to accommodate them, this happens every single day in our corporate arenas and in other arenas. Accommodating, let me tell you what it looks like quickly. Basically, when you are accommodating someone else's insecurities, you know the truth, you know what's right, but you adjust, you soften, you compromise because the people around you, they can't handle it. And then you also may spiritualize your accommodation to make it sound like it's wisdom. So when you look at the story and you try to look at it from a modern day standpoint, let me explain a little bit what that looks like. So here's what accommodating insecurity may look like in the arena. So from a leadership perspective, you may see misalignment, but no one corrects it. So you stay quiet to avoid the tension. In the leadership, you may see decisions aren't being made. So you try to carry that responsibility that was never assigned to you. Next, you don't give honest feedback to the leaders because they're fragile and they can't handle the critique. So you watch maybe a project fail rather than rock the boat. When you're accommodating that insecurity, you don't always advocate for the right decisions because the team is already stressed and you don't want to add to their anxiety. And then you don't set a boundary with a direct report who's underperforming because they're going through a lot. So you carry their workload on top of yours. When you are accommodating someone else's insecurity, it may also impact your voice. You may soften your language in meetings, not because it's unclear, but because, again, someone once told you that you're intimidating. You may preface your idea with those, words of, I could be wrong, that we talked about last week, because managing the insecurity of men or others in the arena is easier for you to do, or you think is easier for you to do because they can't handle a confident woman. I can remember a time where there was a co-manager that was consistently just kind of coming at me. And I remember one time my boss telling me, hey, don't worry about him. He just struggles to work with high achieving women. Wow. Talking about insecurities. Then also, when you are accommodating insecurities, you may start letting down some of those boundaries that you set up. So you may start staying up later, answering emails late at night, taking on extra projects. And again, this is not because you want to, but because saying no might make you seem difficult. You may tolerate inappropriate comments or behavior because you don't want to be labeled the angry woman or too sensitive. And then the boundary that relates to your faith. You might minimize your faith at work because acknowledging it might make people uncomfortable. Here's what happens over time. If you continue to accommodate other people's insecurities, over time, you can lose your own identity. Little by little, you adjust, you soften, you shrink. You try to manage everyone else's emotions while ignoring your own erosion. And one day you look up and you realize that you don't even recognize the woman that you've become. You're exhausted, resentful, burnt out, and you can't figure out why. Because in your mind, you're like, I've been nice. I've been flexible. I've been a team player. No, you've been accommodating other people's insecurity. So what can you do? What are some of the things that you can do to prevent this identity erosion that comes from accommodating other people's insecurity? Let me give you a few things. Let me give you some truths and some new frameworks that you can work with. So let's talk a little bit about the false identity or these identity erosions. Number one, you're operating from a false identity. You're saying, my value is in keeping everyone comfortable. My role is to absorb dysfunction, but it's not. You have started editing yourself. So you stop showing up as who you actually are, and you started showing up as what the environment can tolerate. You've detached yourself from some of your convictions. You become hyper aware of people, but less aware of God. And you've started performing instead of leading. So you're not operating from your identity, but you're operating from reacting. Do you know that every time you adjust your boundaries to accommodate someone's insecurity, that you are training them to stay insecure? And you train yourself to abandon your identity? But here's the thing. Abandoned identity was never your mission. You're an ambassador sent by God with a specific mission, and that mission does not include building golden calves to soothe insecure people. Paul said it in Galatians chapter 1 and verse 10 that he said, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. You were never built to accommodate other people's insecurities, and you're not helping them. But a woman who can help those with insecurities is one who is grounded in her identity. And here's what that woman looks like. She says less, not more, meaning that she stops over explaining. She lets people be uncomfortable, not because she's trying to be rude, but she knows that some of the uncomfortableness that they feel is going to help them to grow. She doesn't rush to fill leadership gaps. She allows leadership to figure some things out so that those gaps can be filled. She refuses to carry what God didn't assign to her, and she maintains standards even when it creates tension. All right, so I mentioned that I was going to give you some truth statements and some powerful reframes. So let me give you those. Here we go. First one. Every time you adjust your boundaries to protect someone else's insecurity, you move further away from your identity. Truth statement number 2. You are not called to manage environments God called other people to lead. Truth statement number 3. Letting people feel the weight of their insecurity is not unkind. It's necessary to bring about the change for them. So now let me give you 3 kind of reframes. Reframe number 1, accommodation is not love. So the old belief says, if I accommodate them, I'm being loving, and Christ-like. Here's your new truth. Love tells the truth. Accommodation enables dysfunction. Jesus didn't accommodate people's insecurities. He healed on the Sabbath, even though it made the Pharisees uncomfortable. He ate with sinners, even though it offended the religious elite. He called out hypocrisy, even when it created conflict. So love doesn't mean making everyone comfortable. Love means doing what's right, even when it's hard. Reframe number 2. Their discomfort is not your emergency. The old belief says, if they're uncomfortable with me, I need to fix it. The new truth says, their emotional response to your God-given identity is not your responsibility. See, when you show up as your authentic self, competent, confident, called by God, some people will be uncomfortable. I've seen it happen. I've seen people that I thought I knew that were uncomfortable when I showed up as my authentic self. But that's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's often a sign that you're doing something right. Remember Daniel? He prayed with his windows open even though it made the king uncomfortable. Esther revealing her identity. You see, their discomfort, other people's discomfort, doesn't disqualify the assignment that God has given to us. And reframe number 3. You can't build the kingdom on a foundation of fear. The old belief says, if I don't accommodate, everything will fall apart. But the new truth says, what falls apart when you stop accommodating wasn't yours to hold together. See, here's what I've learned. When you stop carrying dysfunction that isn't yours, things do shift. Some people do get uncomfortable. Some relationships do change. But what falls apart was never built on a solid foundation. It was built on your willingness to shrink. And what God is building in you, unshakable impact, doesn't require you to betray yourself to sustain it. All right. So we're wrapping up here. How do we apply this practically? What can you do? Here are 4 things. Number 1, name where you're accommodating. So take 5 to 10 minutes, get your journal, and ask yourself this question. Where am I adjusting my identity or my voice or adjusting my boundaries to manage someone else's insecurity. As you are journaling, be very specific. Is it your boss who can't handle feedback? Maybe it's a team member that punished you for setting boundaries, or maybe it's even a friend who diminishes your success. Name whatever it is and journal it. Be honest, because you can't stop accommodating until you know what it is that you're accommodating, right? So you need to name it, you need to identify it. Step number 2, separate their issue from your assignment. So once you've identified where you're accommodating, ask the question, is their discomfort my problem to solve or their growth to own? So here's an example. Your boss gets defensive when challenged. He or she gets defensive when you ask a question for clarity. That's not your issue. That's his. Another example. Your team resents when you set boundaries. Maybe when you say, hey, when I'm on vacation, I'm not going to answer emails. Again, that's their issue. That's not yours. Your job is to show up as the ambassador that God has created you to be with integrity, and their job is to manage their response. So stop taking responsibility for emotions that aren't yours to carry. Number 3, set one boundary this week without apologizing. This week, I want you to practice holding a boundary without accommodation. So maybe it's something like, I won't be available after 6 p.m. But here's my plan for completing the work assignment by Friday. Or maybe it's, I'm not taking on this additional project because my plate is full. So whatever it is, set that boundary. No apologizing, no over explaining, no softening, just clarity and conviction. Remember, authenticity means showing up as your real self, and your real self has limits, and it has needs, and it has convictions. And then number 4, find one person who can handle the real you. You need at least one relationship where you don't have to accommodate. One friend, one mentor, a coach, a sister, a family member, someone who can handle you as you are. They can handle your competence without feeling threatened. They can handle your boundaries without feeling rejected. They can handle your success without feeling jealous. And they can handle your struggles without needing you to fix them. If you don't have that person, ask God to send them. But in the meantime, be that person to someone else. You see, ambassadors need other ambassadors who don't require accommodation. I'm going to leave you a few reflective questions in the show notes. So make sure you look at those and continue to journal and to pray over them, because the answers that you're going to come up with as you look at these questions, they're going to show you where you've been building golden calves instead of representing the kingdom. Well, that's it for this week. If this episode hit something in you today, share it with another woman in the arena who needs to hear it. It might be exactly what she needs today. If you are not already subscribed, do that now so you don't miss what is coming next. And don't forget about my new playbook, The Balance Myth, God's Woman in a Male-Dominated Arena. The link to get your copy is in the show notes. Go get it today, read it this week, and then come back here and tell me what shifted for you, because I want to hear it. I'm rooting for you, sister. Go and be an authentic ambassador. Remember that kingdom authority and corporate influence, it's yours. So go lead. I'll see you next episode right here in the arena.